Let me say good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to the viewers as well. I think basically when you talk about festive season, you would talk about all whatever problems which everybody would encounter in the country. Like for an example, where people are scammed of their cards. So this time of the month, we basically advise our beneficiaries that they need to make sure that they keep their PIN very safe. They make sure that they always have their cards very safe. They also don't necessarily give their cards to the third parties. In this case, we have witnessed situations where people give their cards to what we call abomashonisa, who then take their card, go withdraw their money, and do all sorts of things which are not warranted with their card. So those are some of the safety tips which we give to our beneficiaries.
All right. I hope that's not your vehicle there. That might certainly become a bit of a distraction for you, but let's presume it's not. So, I wonder how much of an intervention you can actually have for people who do, find themselves in those kind of situations where they give their cards to Oma Shonisa, because the fact of the matter is those funds are intended for specific purposes. And I guess it's questionable about whether being in a situation like that actually helps achieve the objectives that Sassa is trying to achieve, which is to ensure that people aren't left below the poverty line, stranded, etc., etc.
Look, I think we engage on beneficiary education just to bring our people to understand that SASSA does not offer any financial services in terms of giving people loans and so on. And we also emphasize all the time that that money is meant for for a beneficiary consent.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that people use the money for its intended purposes. And if you go and give your card to somebody else, for an example, Ayanda, it means you are giving your right to have that money to someone else, then they can do whatever. And as an organization, there is absolutely nothing we can do if you take a card and give it to somebody else. But we definitely go to communities, as we are doing now, to try and give those particular education campaign so that people are aware that they need to keep their cards very safe to them.
Yeah. Now, to say it's been an interesting year for Sassa is just one way of putting it. I'm sure you can find many other adjectives. Part of the challenges, of course, were introduced by the complexities brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, an unprecedented amount of people having to receive that 350 Rand COVID-19 relief grant. And some of them actually, I remember at the beginning stages, being paid twice while others weren't paid at all. Now that we're sort of looking back, so to speak, how many of those issues do you feel have been ironed out? And what are the lessons is Sassa taking into the new year?
Look, and I think some of the lessons we have learned was that, remember, when the directions were passed, we had to do everything within the matter of 2 weeks to make sure that we upload people in the system, we check with all other government agencies and so on. And one of the challenges which we faced at the beginning was that people will upload the wrong ID number, and you can understand if your ID number, one number is wrong there, the whole ID does not belong to Ayanda, but it belongs to somebody else. In some instances, people uploaded wrong cell phone numbers, and we had to trace them, try to get them, and so on. In some instances, we explained that people must not put the copies, but they must just put an ID number. But people kept on putting the copies and so on. But what we have learned, which is very positive, and I think this is what we think we must take forward, is that as government departments and entities, we need to work as one and not in silos. Because at least what we have learned is that we managed to go to other government entities, cooperate with them, and try to make sure and to clean up our system to say, but Ayanda, you said that you are not employed. But when we check, we find that you are actually employed. Then the system kicks you out. So those are some of the positive which we have learned over the period of time.
And the people who are paid twice, the prospects of receiving that money, how alive are they still at this point?
No, I think what we need to explain there, Ayanda, is that people who were paid twice, you would find a person might have applied for 350 in April or in May, and did not get what was due to them in May. And in June, when we make a payment, we had to backdate it and make sure that we pay for May and June. It was not a mistake which of their own, but we found out that there were certain glitches in the process before they got their money. So we are saying if the delay was on the part of Sassa, it is not, we can't have a situation where we then punish a beneficiary. We need to make sure that we give what is due to them.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and it's a separate issue. The minister had actually admitted as much that, especially at the beginning of the process, there were individuals who weren't owed any money, but actually still received a whole lot more than what was allocated to them. She also, at the time, gave an undertaking that that money would be retrieved. Do you have an idea of how much of that money has been retrieved?
No, it's not about the value, but there's a process which we set up. I think I know the question which you are posing to me. I was a little bit confused at the beginning, but what we have done was to put processes in motion to make sure that we basically go to those individuals. For an example, majority of them were in the Western Cape. The province was therefore given an instruction by management to make sure that individuals are traced. We can have an arrangement with them in terms of how we can retrieve that money, because they got the money which was not meant for them. We need to make sure that the money gets back to government, but obviously we have an arrangement with them so that we are able to recoup what government is supposed to have.
Yeah. With the seconds we have left, and it really is a second or so, can you just give us an idea of when Sassa will resume the other grants that were halted because of the COVID-19 pandemic? One of them being, of course, the disability grant in some respects, because doctors who are meant to evaluate some of these potential beneficiaries weren't available. Are we back on track with having those grants resumed at this stage?
We are back on track, and would want to advise our people to make sure that when their grants lapses, they are able to come and make an application so that we can be able to assess them. We don't want people to come flock to our offices when it's late and they don't get processed and there's a problem. But the process is in motion. We're working in conjunction with the Department of Health to make sure that people are processed and they get what is due to them.
All right, thanks very much for coming on to the AM Report. Certainly appreciate your time at this point. That's Paseka Lestatsi, who speaks for the South African Social Security Agency, otherwise known as Sassa, taking stock of this unprecedented year gone by. And hopefully many lessons will be taken into the new year. Paseka, thanks very much indeed for your time.